Some women are taught to forgive. Rhys Evans was about to teach a man what it costs to need forgiveness. The migraine started during the keynote speech, a dull throb behind her left eye that grew sharper with each slide, about market disruption and paradigm shifts. Rhys had smiled through it, nodded at the right moments, laughed when the speaker made a joke about coffee being the real currency of success. She'd worn the black cocktail dress Todd always complimented, the one that made her feel elegant even when she felt exhausted. But halfway through the gala's silent auction, the pain became a living thing, wrapping around her skull like a vice. She'd made her excuses, kissed cheeks, promised to send donation checks, and driven home through streets that blurred at the edges. The house was dark when she arrived. Todd had texted earlier, saying he'd be working late, finishing something important before his morning flight. Seattle, 3 days. Client meetings and site visits. He'd packed that afternoon before leaving for the office, always efficient, always prepared. The overnight bag sat on the bedroom chair exactly where he'd left it, black leather gleaming in the lamplight she switched on. Rhys kicked off her heels, and they hit the hardwood with satisfying thuds. Her feet ached. Her head ached. She wanted aspirin and silence, and maybe a glass of wine she'd drink too fast. She moved toward the bathroom, then stopped. The bag sat there like an accusation she didn't understand yet. Todd never forgot things. He'd remember to pack socks for a weekend trip, but forget their anniversary dinner. He'd triple-check his laptop charger, but leave her standing in the rain outside a restaurant because he'd lost track of time. But he never, ever forgot the practical things that affected him directly. Something cold settled in her chest, though she couldn't name it yet. She walked to the bag and unzipped the main compartment, telling herself she was being paranoid, that she'd just grab his phone charger from the side pocket because he always forgot that particular item, and she could be helpful, could be the wife who thought ahead. Her fingers found the zipper, found the interior pocket, found something wrapped in foil that caught the light. The condom was blue, metallic, ribbed for her pleasure, the package promised. Rhys stood holding it, her brain working through possibilities like a computer running diagnostics. They didn't use these. Hadn't for years, not since they'd started talking about children, not since she'd gone off birth control and they'd fallen into the rhythm of trying without really trying, of not quite hoping because hope required vulnerability neither of them seemed capable of anymore. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her cocktail dress, still holding the square of foil. The migraine had vanished, replaced by a clarity so sharp it hurt worse. Her mind catalogued evidence she'd been ignoring. The way Todd's eyes skated past hers during conversations, how he'd started showering immediately after coming home from the gym, the phone he now kept face down on every surface, the sudden interest in cologne. Things she'd noticed but dismissed because noticing meant dealing with them. And dealing with them meant confronting the possibility that her marriage was a performance they'd both stopped believing in. Rhys didn't cry. Not yet. Part of her wanted to wake Todd at the office, to demand explanations right now, to scream until her throat was raw. But another part of her, the part that had earned a degree in pharmacology before switching careers, was thinking about something else entirely. Something cold and methodical and probably crazy. She walked downstairs to the basement, to the storage boxes she'd packed away years ago when she'd switched from lab work to a career that didn't require night shifts and chemical exposure. Her degree felt like another lifetime, back when she'd believed in precision and measurable outcomes. She found the box labeled University Research and opened it carefully. Inside were notebooks, old equipment, and a small kit she'd kept from her thesis work on fluorescent biological markers. Research that had seemed so important then, so cutting-edge, now just gathering dust in a basement. The idea came slowly at first. Then, all at once, she could mark him. Not hurt him, not poison him, but mark him in a way that would expose the truth when he used that condom with whoever he was planning to meet. The compound she'd worked with was harmless but brilliant under UV light, used in legitimate research to track cellular movement and protein interactions. It would glow under the right conditions. Hospital conditions. Emergency room conditions. But could she actually do it? The technical challenge alone was significant. The condom wrapper was sealed, and any tampering would be visible if not done perfectly. She'd need the right needle gauge, steady hands, precise injection into the reservoir without damaging the latex itself. One mistake and Todd would notice. One miscalculation and the whole thing would fail, or worse, tip him off that she knew something. Reese sat at the basement workbench for nearly an hour, just staring at the kit. This was insane. This was the kind of thing people did in movies, not real life. What if it didn't work? What if it hurt him somehow, despite her certainty that the compound was harmless? What if she was overreacting, and the condom had some innocent explanation she hadn't considered? But then she thought about all those late nights, all those sudden business trips, all those times he'd looked right through her, like she was furniture, and she opened the kit. The preparation took longer than she expected. Her hands shook at first, making the work difficult. She had to stop twice to steady herself, to breathe through the anger and hurt that threatened to overwhelm her focus. The needle she chose was so fine it was barely visible, designed for precise laboratory work. She practiced the motion 3 times on a piece of latex she found in the kit before attempting the actual wrapper. The injection itself took 5 minutes of painstaking work. Pierce the wrapper at the seam where the fold would hide any mark. Guide the needle into the reservoir tip without puncturing through. Inject slowly, watching for any bubbling or leakage. Withdraw carefully. Check the seal. The compound was clear, invisible to the naked eye, only reactive under specific wavelengths of light. She used surgical glue she found in the kit to ensure the seal was perfect, then held it up to the light, examining it from every angle. It looked untouched, perfect, exactly as Todd had left it. Reese placed it back exactly where she'd found it and zipped the bag closed. Then she sat down at the kitchen table with a bottle of wine she opened but didn't drink, her hands still trembling slightly from the precision work and the enormity of what she'd just done. Part of her couldn't believe she'd actually gone through with it. This wasn't who she was. She didn't sabotage or scheme or set traps. She was the reasonable one, the understanding one, the wife who kept everything running smoothly. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe being reasonable had just taught Todd that he could be unreasonable without consequences. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the city, her husband was probably finishing his important work, probably texting someone who wasn't her, probably planning his trip with someone who'd be waiting for him in a hotel room that wasn't really about business. Part of her wanted to be wrong, wanted there to be some innocent explanation she hadn't considered. Maybe the condom was old, forgotten in his bag from years ago. Maybe a friend had slipped it in as a joke. Maybe she was overreacting, letting paranoia transform innocent details into evidence of betrayal. But deep down, in the place where women store truths too painful to examine directly, Reese knew. She'd known for weeks, maybe months. She'd just been too afraid to look directly at what her instincts were screaming. Todd came home after midnight. She heard his keys in the door, his footsteps on the stairs, the sound of him moving through their house, like he owned not just the space, but the air inside it. He found her in the kitchen, the wine bottle still full beside her empty glass. "Hey, you're still up. How was the gala?" His voice was casual, comfortable, the voice of a man who didn't know his wife had just finished preparing his exposure. "Fine. Boring speeches. My head hurt, so I left early." Reese looked at him directly, studying his face like she was seeing it for the first time. Handsome in that generic way, successful men were handsome, with good teeth and careful hair, and a smile that had probably charmed people his whole life. "Your bag's upstairs. You didn't forget anything?" Todd laughed, running a hand through his hair. "See, this is why I married you. Always thinking ahead. I should check, actually. Can't afford to mess up this Seattle deal." "No," Reese said softly, standing and walking past him toward the stairs. "You really can't afford to mess this up?" He didn't catch the double meaning, didn't notice the way she paused at the bedroom doorway, watching him rifle through his bag with the confidence of a man who believed he'd covered his tracks. Didn't see the expression on her face when he zipped the bag closed, satisfied. "All good," he said, kissing her forehead with the same distracted affection he'd show a dog. "You should get some sleep. You look exhausted." "I am," Reese said, and it was the truest thing she'd said to him in months. "So exhausted, Todd." He was already checking his phone, already moving past her toward the bathroom. She listened to him brush his teeth, listened to the familiar sounds of him preparing for bed, listened to him settle under covers on his side, while she stayed standing in the doorway. "You coming to bed?" he asked, yawning. "In a minute. I need to finish something." She went back downstairs and sat in the dark living room, listening to the house settle around her. Her hands had finally stopped shaking. The doubt that had plagued her during the injection was gone, replaced by something colder and more certain. Somewhere above her, Todd was probably already asleep, dreaming whatever men like him dreamed when they'd learned to lie so smoothly they believed their own stories. Tomorrow, he'd wake up, kiss her goodbye, grab his bag, and walk out the door toward whatever he thought he was walking toward. But Reese knew something he didn't. She'd always been 3 steps ahead of him in everything that mattered. He'd just never noticed because he'd never really looked at her, not as a person who thought and planned and remembered everything. He saw a wife who kept his life organized and his home comfortable. He didn't see the woman who'd just finished preparing his reckoning. The clock struck 2 in the morning. Reese finally poured herself wine, just a single glass, and raised it to the empty room in a toast only she understood. Tomorrow, Todd Murphy would board a plane to Seattle, and sometime in the next few days, he'd use that condom with whoever he was meeting. And then the marker would activate, and the consequences would begin, and every choice he'd made in secret would become visible under lights he couldn't control. Some women would call it revenge. Reese wasn't sure what to call it. Justice felt too grand. Revenge felt too petty. Maybe it was just transparency. Maybe it was just refusing to be the only one carrying the weight of truth, while everyone else got to live in comfortable lies. She finished her wine, rinsed the glass, and went upstairs. Todd was snoring softly, one arm flung over what used to be her side of the bed. Reese looked at him for a long moment, memorizing his peaceful face, knowing peace was something he'd have very little of soon. A small voice in her head whispered that maybe she should wake him, give him one chance to confess, to come clean before she set everything in motion. But she silenced that voice. He'd had countless chances, to be honest. He'd chosen lies every single time. Then she went to the guest room, locked the door, and lay awake until morning light crept through unfamiliar windows, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life or the bravest decision she'd ever made. Maybe both. Maybe it didn't matter. The choice was made, and there was no taking it back now. Chapter 2. The Hospital Call. The phone call came while Reese was in a meeting about brand positioning for a furniture company's spring campaign. Her phone buzzed against the conference table, an unknown number she normally would have ignored. But something made her excuse herself and step into the hallway, some instinct that this call mattered. "Is this Reese Evans? This is Nurse Callahan from Mercy General Hospital. You're listed as the emergency contact for Todd Murphy." The words that followed were professionally delivered, but Reese could hear the barely suppressed confusion in the nurse's voice. Todd had presented at the emergency room earlier that morning in what was described as an acute state of distress regarding a dermatological condition of an intimate nature. They needed her to come in. The doctor wanted to speak with both of them. No, nothing life-threatening. Yes, it was urgent. Somewhat urgent. Actually, the nurse admitted, it was more embarrassing than urgent. But Mr. Murphy had been quite insistent about comprehensive testing. Reese drove to the hospital with her hands locked on the steering wheel, her face carefully blank. She'd been waiting for this call, but hadn't expected it quite so soon. Todd must have been in quite a hurry with whoever he'd been with. The thought should have hurt, but instead she felt nothing but clinical interest in what came next, mixed with a nauseating dread she kept pushing down. Part of her still hoped she was wrong, that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. The hospital's fluorescent lighting made everything look slightly unreal as she approached the reception desk. A tired-looking nurse directed her to a private examination room on the 3rd floor. Reese walked slowly, letting anticipation build, her heart hammering against her ribs despite her outward calm. This was going to be a conversation Todd had never prepared for. She knocked once and entered. Todd sat on an examination table wearing a hospital gown, his clothes folded neatly on a chair, his face the exact color of old newspaper. When he saw her, something between relief and terror crossed his expression. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the paper gown and the institutional lighting and whatever had brought him here in a panic. Reese, thank God. There's been some kind of... I don't know what's happening. I need you to help me explain to these people that... Mr. Murphy, a doctor interrupted, entering behind Reese. He was middle-aged, with kind eyes and the exhausted demeanor of someone who'd seen everything humanity had to offer and remained professionally unimpressed. I'm Dr. Hernandez. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Murphy. Your husband presented this morning with concerns about unusual pigmentation on his genital area following intimate contact. He was worried about infection or allergic reaction. Reese maintained perfect composure, though her stomach twisted. Pigmentation? The blue discoloration. Quite vivid, actually. We ran tests for several possibilities, including sexually transmitted infections, allergic reactions to latex or spermicide, bacterial infections, fungal conditions, even rare autoimmune reactions. Nothing conclusive came back positive. Dr. Hernandez pulled up images on a tablet, and Reese had to actively suppress a smile, despite the sickness in her gut. The UV marker had worked perfectly. Todd's most intimate areas glowed bright blue in the photographs, like he'd been tagged by some divine highlighter. Todd's voice cracked. It won't wash off. I tried everything. Soap body wash. I even tried rubbing alcohol, and it just made my skin raw. I panicked. I thought maybe it was something serious, something contagious. I didn't know what to do. It sounds like a contact reaction, Reese said smoothly, looking at the doctor instead of her husband, proud that her voice didn't shake. Have you been using any new products at home, Todd? New laundry detergent? Different body wash? The question hung in the air like a grenade with a pulled pin. Todd's eyes locked on hers, and she watched understanding dawn across his face in slow motion. He knew. She could see the exact moment he realized she'd orchestrated this, that somehow his wife had turned his betrayal into a glowing blue advertisement visible only under medical equipment. His expression cycled through confusion, realization, horror, and something that looked almost like respect before settling on trapped desperation. Actually, Dr. Hernandez said, consulting his notes, the UV examination revealed the substance has properties consistent with certain industrial or research-grade fluorescent compounds. It's not typical of any commercial product. Mr. Murphy, have you been exposed to any workplace chemicals, research facilities, any fluorescent materials, manufacturing plants, anything unusual? Todd opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. He looked like a man drowning in shallow water, unable to explain how he'd gotten there. A muscle in his jaw twitched as he struggled for words that wouldn't come. You know, Reese said thoughtfully, maintaining her concerned wife expression while her eyes stayed locked on Todd's panicked face. I did try a new laundry service last week. They advertised some kind of optical brightening technology for whites. Very aggressive marketing about their revolutionary cleaning process. Maybe something in their industrial treatment reacted badly with the fabric. We do have those new bamboo sheets. It was a flimsy explanation at best, but Dr. Hernandez looked relieved to have any rational answer that didn't involve admitting he had no idea what he was looking at. That could potentially explain it. Some industrial brighteners can be quite potent, especially if they're using commercial-grade treatments not meant for direct skin contact. Though the concentration here is unusual, very unusual. I've honestly never seen fluorescence quite this intense outside of laboratory settings. He turned to Todd, who'd gone from pale to flushed. Mr. Murphy, did you notice any discomfort during use of these potentially treated fabrics? Any burning sensation? Itching? Immediate reaction? Todd's face cycled through several shades of red. During use of, what exactly, he stopped, realizing anything he said would trap him further. The bedding, Reese supplied helpfully, her voice steady despite wanting to scream. We have those new bamboo sheets, very soft, expensive. Perhaps too much brightener in the fabric treatment? Could that transfer during physical activity, extended contact with skin? The clinical language made everything worse. Dr. Hernandez nodded seriously, while Todd looked like he wanted the examination table to swallow him whole. A nurse knocked and entered, adding to the audience for Todd's humiliation, carrying additional test results. Dr. Hernandez, the additional panels are back. No bacterial infections, no viral indicators, no fungal growth, nothing that suggests STI transmission of any kind. The substance appears to be purely topical and non-infectious. Blood work is completely normal. It's just there, glowing, very brightly glowing. Excellent news, the doctor said, genuinely relieved. Mr. Murphy, this should resolve on its own, as the compound metabolizes and sheds with natural skin cell turnover. We're talking perhaps 2 to 3 days, maybe up to a week, depending on the concentration. In the meantime, avoid further contact with whatever source introduced the substance, and if you experience any discomfort, use a gentle moisturizer. Nothing scented, and probably avoid intimate contact until the discoloration fades, just to be cautious. Todd made a sound that might have been acknowledgement or might have been suppressed hysteria. The nurse handed him a discharge summary and instructions for care, speaking in the professionally chipper tone healthcare workers used for embarrassing conditions. She was trying not to smile. Reese could see the corner of her mouth twitching. Reese accepted the paperwork with gracious thanks, playing her role perfectly. We really appreciate your thoroughness, Doctor. I know my husband was very worried. One more thing, Dr. Hernandez added, and Todd visibly tensed. You mentioned you noticed this after intimate contact this morning. Was this with your wife? Because, if so, we should examine Mrs. Murphy as well to ensure she hasn't been exposed to whatever caused this reaction. Standard protocol for contact dermatology of unknown origin. The room went silent. Todd's eyes widened with fresh panic. No! Todd's voice came out strangled. Not with my wife. We haven't, it wasn't, He stopped, realizing he'd just admitted to infidelity in front of medical professionals and his wife. And the expression on his face was worth every moment of planning. Dr. Hernandez's professional mask slipped slightly, his eyebrows rising as he glanced between them. The nurse suddenly became very interested in the medical equipment in the corner. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Oh, Dr. Hernandez said carefully, clearly wishing he hadn't asked. I see. Well, in any case, the substance doesn't appear to be contagious or harmful, just visible. Under UV light, particularly. Very visible. Remarkably so, actually. I've never seen anything quite like it in terms of fluorescent intensity. It's almost as if someone deliberately... He stopped himself. Well, it doesn't matter. You're medically fine, Mr. Murphy, just very blue. Todd was now the color of raw meat. He couldn't look at anyone. Reese watched him shrink inside his hospital gown and felt satisfaction settle into her bones like good whiskey, mixed with a sorrow so deep she could barely breathe through it. This was her husband, the man she'd chosen, and here they were. Can I get dressed now? Todd asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Of course. Nurse Callahan will provide care instructions and schedule a follow-up if needed, though honestly, I expect this will resolve without intervention. Just let nature take its course. Dr. Hernandez shook Reese's hand, his grip sympathetic. Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Murphy. These situations can be complicated, but from a medical standpoint, your husband is fine. Just very distinctively marked. After the doctor and nurse left, the door clicking shut behind them, Reese turned to Todd with an expression of polite inquiry. The facade she'd maintained cracked slightly at the edges. "Should I wait outside while you dress, or would you like help?" "Don't!" Todd's voice shook. "Don't do that. Don't act like you don't know exactly what happened here. You did this. Somehow you did this." "What happened here," Reese said quietly, her voice finally showing emotion, "is that you got caught with proof literally written on your body. Glowing proof. Undeniable proof. What happened before here is that you betrayed every promise you made to me. So right now, I'm going to wait in the lobby while you make yourself presentable. Then you're going to drive yourself home, because I can't stand to be in a car with you. And tonight, Todd, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation than the ones we've been having." "Reese, please." "Please what? Please forgive you. Please pretend I don't know you flew to Seattle to sleep with someone else. Please go back to being blind and stupid and convenient." Her voice was rising now, control slipping. "Get dressed, Todd. Go home. And think very carefully about what you're going to say to me, because I promise you, I already know more than you think I do." She walked out before he could respond, her heels clicking against the hospital tile with metronomic precision. In the elevator, a young couple held hands and looked at each other with the kind of tenderness that made Reese's chest ache. She'd looked at Todd like that once, believed in him like that once, trusted him like that once. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and Reese stepped into the weak afternoon sunlight filtering through the hospital's front windows. Her phone buzzed with a text from Todd. "Please wait. We need to talk about this now." "I can explain." She deleted it without responding. He could drive himself home. He could sit with his glowing blue shame. He could start preparing whatever explanation he thought might work, though they both knew nothing would, because this wasn't the end. This was barely the beginning. Reese walked to her car, got in, and sat there for 5 minutes with her forehead pressed against the steering wheel, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of what she'd just done. She'd humiliated her husband in a hospital. She'd orchestrated public exposure of his infidelity. She'd crossed lines she couldn't uncross, and she didn't regret it, not even a little bit. She drove toward the life she was about to systematically dismantle and rebuild. Behind her, Todd Murphy sat in a hospital examination room, pulling on his clothes with shaking hands, finally understanding that his wife wasn't the woman he thought she'd married. She was so much more dangerous than that. Chapter 3. The Evidence and the Breakdown. Reese arrived home first and used the time efficiently. She'd prepared for this moment during sleepless nights, gathering evidence with the methodical patience of someone who knew that rage without proof was just noise. Now she spread that proof across their dining room table like a card dealer revealing a winning hand. Bank statements showing charges at hotels she'd never visited. Restaurant receipts from intimate dinners. For 2 on-nights, Todd claimed he was working late. Phone records she'd obtained by simply accessing their shared family account, revealing hundreds of text messages to a number she'd eventually traced to Simone Ashford, her former college roommate, her supposed best friend, the woman who'd been at their wedding, who'd sent birthday gifts every year, who'd sat at this exact table just weeks ago eating the risotto Reese had spent hours perfecting. The betrayal from Todd hurt like a deep bruise. The betrayal from Simone felt like amputation. Reese had printed screenshots of text messages she'd recovered from Todd's laptop, which he'd forgotten to password protect because he'd never imagined she'd look. The messages went back months. Inside jokes, plans to meet, Simone calling him baby in a way that made Reese's stomach turn. Todd telling Simone that his marriage was comfortable but empty, and that he'd never felt truly seen until he met her. That particular message had made Reese cry for 2 hours straight when she'd first read it. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't destroying. She heard Todd's car pull into the driveway and positioned herself at the head of the table, the evidence arranged in chronological order, a timeline of deceit. He entered slowly, still moving like everything hurt, and stopped when he saw what she'd prepared. His face went through several expressions before settling on resignation. "Sit down," Reese said. Not a request, Todd sat. His eyes tracked across the table, recognizing each piece of evidence, watching his lies become undeniable in printed form. How long have you known? Long enough to gather all of this. Long enough to prepare. Long enough to realize that everything I thought we had was a performance you stopped caring about. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly, betraying the emotion she was trying to contain. Before you say anything, Reese continued, I want you to understand that I already know everything. The hotel in Portland last month wasn't a conference. The dinner at Carmichael's wasn't a client meeting. The overnight bag you packed for Seattle had a condom in it because you were planning to meet her there. Simone Ashford, my friend, my roommate from college, the woman who stood next to me at our wedding and promised to always support us. Todd's face went through several expressions, settling finally on cornered desperation. Reese, I can explain. It's not what you think. It just happened. We didn't plan. Don't. Her voice cracked like a whip. Don't insult me with that story. These texts go back 7 months, Todd. 7 months of planning. 7 months of you telling her things you stopped telling me. 7 months of you making a fool of me while I cooked dinners and asked about your day and believed you when you said you were tired from work. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back like he was contaminated. It meant nothing. She means nothing. You're my wife. You're the one If I meant anything, you wouldn't have done this. Reese stood abruptly, her chair scraping against hardwood. You want to know what's funny, Todd? I spent weeks trying to figure out what I did wrong. What I wasn't giving you that made you need someone else. I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered if I was pretty enough, interesting enough, present enough. I questioned everything about myself before I ever questioned you. That's not fair. You're perfect. This isn't about you. You're right. It's about you. It's about you being selfish and cowardly and too weak to either fix our marriage or end it honestly. Reese's composure was cracking now, anger leaking through the clinical calm she'd maintained. You took the easy way, the secretive way, the way that let you have everything without risking anything. Todd stood too, desperation making him bold. I'm sorry. God, Reese, I'm so sorry. I'll end it. I'll never speak to her again. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. Just please. Please what? Please forgive you. Please pretend this didn't happen. Please go back to being the convenient wife who doesn't ask questions. Her voice was rising now, the emotions she'd been containing finally breaking free. You don't get to make mistakes this big and then dictate how I react to them. You don't get to hurt me this deeply and then demand I make it easy for you to feel better. I love you, Todd said, and he probably believed it. I love you, and I made a horrible mistake, and I'm begging you to give me a chance to make this right. Reese looked at him for a long moment. This man she'd chosen and trusted and built a life with, and saw him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't sorry he'd hurt her. He was sorry he'd been caught. The distinction mattered. You're sleeping in the guest room, she said finally, and tomorrow things are going to change in ways you're not prepared for. I'm not interested in your apologies, Todd. I'm interested in you experiencing consequences. What does that mean? Reese, what are you planning? She walked past him without answering, climbed the stairs to their bedroom and locked the door behind her. Only then, alone in the dark room that smelled like his cologne and her perfume and all their wasted years, did Reese allow herself to break. She grabbed a framed photo from the dresser, their wedding picture, both of them young and smiling and stupidly hopeful, and threw it against the wall. The glass shattered with a satisfying crack. She pulled open his drawers and swept clothes onto the floor. She grabbed the decorative pillows from the bed and threw them one by one until her arms were tired. And then, finally, she collapsed onto the mattress and cried. She cried for the marriage that was already dead. She cried for the friend she'd lost without even knowing it. She cried for the version of herself who'd believed in promises and forever and the goodness of people she loved. She cried ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body, tears soaking into the expensive sheets Todd's mother had given them as an anniversary gift. The crying lasted until she had nothing left, until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw and her chest ached from heaving breaths. Then Reese got up, walked to the bathroom, and stared at her destroyed reflection. Red eyes, blotchy skin, hair disheveled from pulling at it. This was what grief looked like. This was what betrayal did to a woman's face. She turned on the shower as hot as she could stand it and stepped under the spray, still wearing her clothes from work. The water pounded against her like absolution. She stayed there until the water ran cold, until her clothes were soaked and heavy, until she couldn't tell the difference between water and tears anymore. When she finally emerged, shivering and wrung out, Reese stripped off her wet clothes and wrapped herself in a towel. She caught her reflection again, and this time saw something different. Beneath the ruin of her crying, beneath the exhaustion and pain, there was something harder, something that wouldn't bend anymore. Todd Murphy had made a mistake, thinking she would collapse quietly, that she'd cry and forgive, and let him slide back into comfortable life with a few months of improved behavior and some therapy sessions. He'd underestimated her completely. Reese dried off, pulled on fresh clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed. She opened her laptop and began composing emails. The first one went to Kyle Murphy, Todd's brother. The subject line read, "We need to talk about Todd tomorrow morning. It's urgent." The second went to a lawyer she'd researched but never contacted. Until now. The third was the hardest. She typed Simone's email address into the recipient field and stared at the blank message space for 10 full minutes. There were so many things she wanted to say, so many questions she wanted answers to. How could you? Why her? Was I ever really your friend? Did you laugh about me when you were with him? Did you feel guilty or just excited? In the end, Reese typed just 5 words. I know. This isn't over. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then immediately felt sick. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. Part of her wanted to take it back, wanted to pretend she'd never discovered any of it, wanted to rewind time to before the condom, before the suspicions, before her entire world had cracked open to reveal rot underneath. But you couldn't unknow things, couldn't unsee evidence, couldn't unfeel betrayal. She turned off the lights and lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere below, Todd was probably awake too, worrying about what came next. Good. He should worry. He should lose sleep. He should feel the weight of his choices pressing down until he understood what he'd done. Reese didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about everything that would come next, about the life she was about to dismantle and whether she had the strength to follow through. By morning, she'd decided she did. The crying was finished. Now came the reckoning. Chapter 4. The Family Fracture. Kyle Murphy's office was downtown. Glass and steel and expensive furniture that spoke of success earned through discipline rather than charm. Reese had only been there a handful of times during her marriage to Todd. Kyle had always been cordial but distant, the responsible older brother who viewed Todd's easier charisma with something between affection and exasperation. She arrived without an appointment and told the receptionist it was urgent and personal. 5 minutes later, Kyle emerged looking concerned, ushering her into his private office and closing the door. "Reese, what's wrong? Is Todd okay?" "That depends on your definition of okay." She opened her folder and placed the evidence on his desk methodically. "Your brother has been having an affair for the past 7 months with my former roommate. He's also been charging their hotels and dinners to his company card, listing them as client entertainment. I thought you should know both things before this becomes a bigger problem." Kyle's face went from concerned to shocked to coldly furious in the space of seconds. He picked up the printed credit card statements, examining the charges with the eye of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. "Carmichael's isn't cheap. Neither is the Harbor Inn. These are significant charges. He's been filing these as legitimate expenses." Kyle's voice was quiet but sharp. "That's fraud, Reese. That's grounds for termination and possible legal action. The board would have to— Christ, Todd, what were you thinking? I'm aware. Reese sat back, watching him process. I'm not interested in destroying your company or pursuing legal action unless I have to. But I need you to understand what Todd's been doing, because what comes next is going to be uncomfortable for your entire family. Kyle looked at her with new respect, but also wariness. What comes next? Accountability, public acknowledgement of his choices. I'm not going to be the silent, forgiving wife who pretends this didn't happen, so everyone else can be comfortable. Your brother betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and he did it with someone I trusted. So yes, it's going to be messy, and yes, people are going to talk. And I need to know if you're going to try to protect him from consequences, or if you understand that sometimes men need to face what they've done. Kyle was quiet for a long moment, studying the evidence in front of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. Reese, I hear you, and what Todd did is inexcusable, but he's still my brother. I can't just abandon him or throw him to the wolves without giving him a chance to explain himself. That's not how family works. The response stung, though Reese tried not to show it. She'd hoped for unconditional support, but Kyle's loyalty was more complicated than that. So you're going to protect him? I'm going to talk to him, honestly and directly. I'm going to address the expense fraud, because that affects the business, and I can't ignore it. But Reese, I also need to hear his side before I make decisions about family relationships, and that's fair, isn't it? Fair. The word felt bitter. Nothing about this situation was fair, but Reese nodded, understanding she'd misjudged how this would go. Kyle wasn't going to be the ally she'd imagined. He was going to be diplomatic, measured, trying to balance his business responsibilities with brotherly loyalty. I understand, she said quietly. Thank you for hearing me out. As she left Kyle's office, Reese felt the first real crack in her confidence. She'd expected immediate support, assumed Todd's family would side with her once they knew the truth. But families were complicated, and blood often won over justice. The second part of Reese's plan happened that evening. She'd invited Todd's parents for dinner without telling him, hoping that a face-to-face conversation would force honesty and accountability. Fletcher and Diane Murphy arrived at 6, surprised to find the table set formally, candles lit, an expensive bottle of wine breathing on the counter. This is unexpected, Diane said, hugging Reese warmly. You didn't mention dinner when we spoke last week. Is everything all right? Just wanted to see you both. It's been too long. Reese forced brightness into her voice. Todd should be home any minute. When Todd walked in and saw his parents in the living room, his face went pale. He'd looked at Reese with something close to panic, but she just smiled and handed him a glass of wine. Your parents are staying for dinner. Isn't that nice? The meal was exquisite torture. Reese played the perfect hostess, asking about Fletcher's golf game and Diane's book club, complimenting the flowers they'd brought, serving courses with impeccable timing. Todd sat rigid in his chair, barely eating, responding to questions in monosyllables, while Reese carried the conversation with practiced ease. You seem tired. Honey, Diane observed, looking at her son with maternal concern. Are you feeling all right? Just work stress, Todd muttered, not meeting anyone's eyes. Actually, Reese said pleasantly, setting down her fork, Todd had quite a scare yesterday. He had to go to the emergency room. Didn't you mention that to your parents, sweetheart? Todd's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Fletcher and Diane both turned to him with alarm. The hospital. Todd, what happened? Are you ill? No, I'm fine. It was nothing. It was something unusual with his skin, Reese continued, her voice honey-sweet with an edge that could cut. The doctors weren't quite sure what caused it. Very mysterious. But everything worked out in the end. Didn't it, Todd? The look he gave her could have melted steel, but he couldn't explain. Couldn't tell his parents about the blue glowing marker that had exposed his affair in the most humiliating way possible. So he just nodded tightly and changed the subject to a work project that didn't exist. The evening dragged on, with Reese maintaining her performance while Todd squirmed. But Fletcher and Diane seemed to accept everything at face value, concerned but not suspicious. By the time they left, Reese felt deflated. She'd expected the dinner to crack open the truth, to force Todd's parents to see what their son had become. Instead, they'd just had an awkward meal that accomplished nothing. After they drove away, Todd turned on Reese with quiet fury. "Oh, what was that? Why did you do that? I wanted them to see you. To really see you. But they didn't, did they? Because you're too good at pretending everything is fine. You're playing games. You're trying to humiliate me in front of my family, but it's not working. They love me. They're not going to turn on me just because you're angry." The confidence in his voice made Reese realize he might be right. Family loyalty was a powerful thing, and Todd had spent his whole life building credit with his parents. Her word against his might not be enough. Your mother is going to call tomorrow, asking what's really going on. When she does, you can either lie to her or tell her the truth. Either way, she's going to know something is very wrong with you. "Maybe," Todd said, some of his cockiness returning. "Or maybe she'll think you're the one acting strange. Inviting them over without telling me, making cryptic comments, staring at me like I'm a criminal. Who looks unstable in this scenario, Reese? Really think about it." The words hit harder than she wanted to admit. Todd was right that he could spin this, could make her look like the problem. She'd been so focused on exposing him that she hadn't considered how it might backfire, how her own behavior could be twisted into evidence of irrationality. Good night. Todd, sleep well in the guest room. But as she climbed the stairs, Reese felt less certain than she had that morning. The family fracture she'd imagined was happening more slowly and messily than she'd planned. Kyle was diplomatic rather than supportive. Fletcher and Diane were oblivious or deliberately blind. Todd was fighting back, reframing her justified anger as unstable behavior. This was going to be harder than she thought. The call from Diane came the next morning while Reese was drinking coffee and Todd was already gone to work. Avoiding confrontation, Reese let it ring twice before answering, heart pounding. "Diane, hi." "Reese, honey, I need you to tell me what's happening. Last night was... something felt very wrong. Is Todd okay? Are you okay? You both seem so tense. Please be honest with me." And that's when Reese told her. Not cruelly, not dramatically, but honestly. She explained about the condom, about discovering the affair with Simone, about months of lies. Diane listened in complete silence until Reese finished. Then Diane Murphy, matriarch of the Murphy family and a woman who'd raised her sons to be better than this, said something Reese didn't expect. "Oh, honey, I suspected something like this might be happening." "You did?" "A mother knows her children. I've seen changes in Todd these past months. Distance, distraction. The way he talks about you has changed too, like you're a responsibility instead of a partner." "I hoped I was wrong, but..." Diane's voice cracked. "I'm so deeply sorry. You deserve better from my son, from all of us. We should have seen this." The validation nearly broke Reese. Finally, someone believed her without qualification. "What do I do now?" "Whatever you need to do. And Reese, I'm here. Not just as Todd's mother, but as someone who cares about you. You're not alone in this." When Todd came home that evening, his phone showed 17 missed calls from his mother and 8 from his father. Reese was sitting in the living room reading a book, perfectly calm. "What did you tell them?" "You demanded, his earlier confidence gone. The truth. Your mother asked me directly, and I wasn't going to lie to protect you." Reese turned a page without looking up. "I believe your father wants to speak with you. Something about family values and integrity." Todd's phone rang again. He looked at the screen showing his father's name, and his hands started to shake. He answered, walking outside for privacy Reese didn't care about. Through the window, she watched him pace the driveway, his posture increasingly defeated, as Fletcher Murphy apparently delivered the conversation Todd had been dreading. When he came back inside 30 minutes later, Todd looked like someone had removed his spine. "My father says I'm a disappointment, that I've disgraced the family name, that he's ashamed of me." "You should be ashamed," Reese said simply. "Your father's right to be disappointed. You earned that. You turned my family against me. No, Todd, you did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you. She closed her book and stood. Tomorrow, Kyle is calling a board meeting about your expense reports. Your sister posted something on social media about family loyalty and true characters. And everyone in your life is going to start realizing what kind of man you actually are. And all of it is because of choices you made. Not me, you. Todd sank onto the couch, head in his hands. What do you want from me, Reese? What do I have to do to make this stop? You can't make it stop. You can only live through it. She walked toward the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Simone got my email. She called me crying, begging for forgiveness. I didn't answer. Apparently, once the affair lost its secrecy, it lost its appeal. Funny how that works. She left him sitting there in the ruins of everything he'd taken for granted. Diane's support had been a victory, but the larger battle was just beginning. Todd wasn't going down without a fight, and his family's loyalty was more fractured than united. Reese understood now that destroying his world wouldn't be clean or quick. It would be messy and exhausting, and she'd have to fight for every inch. But she was ready, because she had nothing left to lose. Chapter 5. The Public Humiliation. Reese spent her morning doing something that would have seemed impossible a week ago, something calculated and cold that made her question who she was becoming. She was hiring Simone's struggling graphic design studio for a major contract, unworth enough money to legitimize Simone's business and potentially establish her reputation in ways she'd been working toward for years. The email she sent was professional, enthusiastic and completely void of personal acknowledgement. She outlined a comprehensive campaign for one of her firm's clients, praised Simone's portfolio, and suggested they meet to discuss the creative direction. Simone's response came within an hour, a mixture of cautious excitement and barely concealed confusion that bled through even her professional language. They scheduled lunch at Bellamy's, an upscale restaurant known for intimate corners and excellent wine. Reese arrived first, choosing a prominent table near the center where they'd be visible but not overheard. She dressed impeccably, her armor of success perfectly assembled, tailored navy suit, subtle jewelry, makeup that made her look powerful and untouchable. She felt like she was playing a role, acting out someone else's revenge fantasy instead of living her own life. Simone arrived looking nervous, beautiful in that effortless way that had always made Reese feel like she tried too hard. They'd been roommates for 3 years in college, navigating heartbreaks and exams and dreams together. Simone had been at Reese's graduation, her bridal shower, her wedding. They'd talked about hypothetical children having playdates together someday, had cried together over bad boyfriends and celebrated each other's successes and promised to always be honest with each other. All of it had been a lie, apparently. Or maybe it had been real once and stopped being real somewhere along the way. Reese didn't know which possibility hurt more. Reese, Simone said carefully, sitting down like the chair might be rigged. I have to say I was surprised by your email. Given everything, business is business. Reese smiled with professional warmth that didn't reach her eyes. Your work is genuinely impressive, and this client needs exactly what you offer. Personal feelings shouldn't interfere with professional opportunities. That's what mature adults do, right? Separate business from personal? The statement hung between them, heavy with implications neither addressed directly. They spent the next hour discussing creative concepts, timelines, deliverables. Simone gradually relaxed, drawn into the excitement of a career-defining project. Reese played her part perfectly, enthusiastic and collaborative, every inch the successful professional investing in emerging talent. But underneath the performance, Reese felt hollow. This wasn't who she wanted to be. This calculated cruelty, this elaborate trap she was setting, it felt wrong, even as she executed it perfectly. Halfway through dessert, Todd walked into the restaurant with a client, and Reese's heart stopped. This was the moment she'd orchestrated, but now that it was happening, she felt sick. Reese saw him first, watched recognition freeze his features mid-stride. Their table was impossible to miss. Simone followed Reese's gaze, and when she saw Todd, her face drained of color so completely she looked like she might faint. Todd's client, an older man in an expensive suit, noticed the reaction immediately. "Someone you know?" Todd couldn't not acknowledge them. Walking past would be obvious, suspicious. So he approached their table with the expression of a man walking toward his own execution, his steps reluctant and his face carefully blank. "Reese, Simone, what a coincidence!" His voice was tight, controlled. "Todd." Reese's smile was radiant, though it felt like glass cutting her face. "We're discussing a new campaign. Simone's studio is doing such innovative work. You remember Simone, don't you? My dearest friend from college. We were just reminiscing about old times, weren't we, Simone?" Simone made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been suppressed hysteria. Her hand shook as she reached for her water glass. Todd's client extended his hand to Reese, oblivious to the undercurrents. "I'm Richard Holloway. Any friend of the Murphy family is someone I'd like to know. Are you in creative work as well?" "Oh, no," Reese said warmly, shaking his hand while feeling like she was watching herself from outside her body. "I'm Todd's wife, and Simone here is truly my oldest friend. We trust each other completely, with everything. Don't we, Simone?" The emphasis on trust and everything landed like physical blows. Simone's water glass slipped slightly in her grip, water sloshing over the rim. Todd looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him. "Your wife?" Richard looked between them with friendly interest. "How wonderful that you're all so close. The Murphys are good people. Todd's told me much about his marriage. Very solid partnership, he says, built on mutual respect and honesty." "Oh yes," Reese agreed, and something in her voice must have been off because Todd flinched. "Very solid. Built on complete honesty and transparency." "Right, honey." Todd reached for his water glass on a nearby server's tray just to have something to do with his hands, misjudged the distance, and knocked it over. Water cascaded across his shirt and pants, soaking him instantly. He jumped back with a strangled curse while Richard grabbed napkins and tried to help. "Oh God, I'm sorry. Let me—" Todd was patting ineffectively at his drenched clothes, while Simone looked like she wanted to disappear and Reese maintained her pleasant expression. "Are you all right?" Richard asked with concern. "Fine, I'm fine, just clumsy." Todd's face was bright red now, mortified and soaking wet. A server rushed over with more napkins while other diners glanced their way. The scene was absurd, almost slapstick, and Reese found herself fighting an urge to laugh hysterically. Her husband, her cheating husband, standing there dripping and humiliated in front of the woman he'd been sleeping with and the wife he'd betrayed. All while his client looked on with confusion. "Perhaps we should get you cleaned up," Richard suggested. "The men's room?" Yes, good idea." Todd seized the excuse to escape, practically fleeing toward the bathroom with Richard following, still trying to be helpful. The moment they were gone, Simone turned to Reese with desperate eyes. "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" Reese's expression remained pleasant, but her voice was cold. "Offering you a career opportunity? Or making sure both of you understand that I know exactly what happened, and you don't get to pretend it away while I suffer in silence? This is cruel." "No, Simone. Cruel is sleeping with your friend's husband. Cruel is lying to someone's face while destroying their marriage. This is just honesty. Something neither of you bothered with." Reese's voice cracked slightly. "Did you ever actually care about me? Was any of our friendship real, or was I always just convenient until something better came along?" Simone's eyes filled with tears. "Of course I cared. I still care. That's why this is so hard, why I feel so guilty." "You feel guilty because you got caught. Not because you care about me." Reese stood abruptly, gathering her purse. "I'll send the contract details tomorrow. You'll find the terms are very fair, assuming you're comfortable working with someone whose life you helped destroy. Your choice entirely." She walked out, leaving Simone sitting alone at the table, finally understanding that Reese Evans wasn't going to collapse quietly. But as Reese walked to her car, she felt none of the satisfaction she'd expected. Instead, she felt exhausted and slightly ill, like she'd won a battle but at a cost she hadn't calculated. Humiliating them publicly had felt necessary in her planning, but now it just felt petty and small. In the restaurant bathroom, Todd stood at the sink trying to dry his clothes under the hand dryer, while Richard waited awkwardly near the door. Todd's phone buzzed repeatedly. He pulled it out to see messages from Simone. She knows everything. "Call me now, please." He couldn't call her with Richard right there. Couldn't explain. Couldn't do anything but stand there in his wet clothes, feeling like the universe was conspiring to destroy him. "Everything all right?" Richard asked carefully. "That was a bit awkward out there." "Just a spill happens." Todd forced a smile that felt like his face might crack. "Your wife seems lovely." "She is. And close with her friend." "That's nice. Very close." The conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Todd finished his futile attempt at drying off and followed Richard back to their table, sitting through the rest of their meal in damp clothes while trying to discuss real estate developments and feeling his life unravel thread by thread. Later, in his car, Todd finally called Simone back. "She answered on the first ring. She's playing with us," Simone said without preamble. "She knows everything and she's systematically destroying us both. That lunch, that job offer, it's all a trap." "I know. What do we do?" "We end this now, completely, no more contact. Maybe if we just disappear from each other's lives, she'll stop." "You think that'll work?" "I don't know." Simone's voice broke. "But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep looking over my shoulder, waiting for her to reveal some new humiliation. I'm done, Todd, with all of it. With you." The line went dead. Todd sat in his car in the parking structure, dripping and alone, finally understanding that his affair wasn't exciting or romantic or worth any of this. It was just pathetic. What neither of them knew was that a private investigator Reese had hired was parked 3 cars away, recording every word through equipment that turned their panicked conversation into evidence she'd use later. Back at her office, Reese sat at her desk staring at nothing, feeling empty despite executing her plan perfectly. She'd humiliated them. She'd made them panic. She'd demonstrated power, but it didn't feel like winning. It just felt like everyone was losing. Chapter 6. The Speech. The Women's Leadership Conference had been scheduled for months, but Reese had only confirmed her speaking slot 2 weeks ago. The organizers had been thrilled. Reese Evans was exactly the kind of success story they wanted to feature. Accomplished professional, respected in her field, known for grace under pressure. They had no idea what kind of pressure she'd been under lately, or what she was planning to say. The conference filled the downtown convention center's main hall. Hundreds of women, some young professionals just starting their careers, others seasoned executives looking for inspiration. Todd's mother had insisted he attend to support his wife, unaware she was orchestrating his public unmasking. Diane had meant well, thinking marital support would help whatever was wrong between them. Todd had tried to refuse, but couldn't explain why, without revealing everything. So he sat in the back row, looking like a man attending his own funeral. Reese stood backstage, looking at her notes with shaking hands. She'd prepared her speech carefully, but now, minutes before going on, she was second-guessing everything. Was she really going to do this? Expose her marriage's failure in front of hundreds of people? Use her pain as a teaching moment for strangers while humiliating the man she'd once loved? "You're on in 5, a stage manager said cheerfully. Reese took a deep breath. She thought about the condom, about Simone's text to Todd, about the hospital humiliation, about every lie and dismissal and moment of feeling small and stupid and disposable. She walked on stage to warm applause. The speech started safely enough, discussing career pivots and strategic thinking, talking about her transition from pharmacology to a field where she'd built genuine success. The audience nodded, took notes, smiled at her anecdotes. This was comfortable territory, expected territory. Then Reese did something she hadn't planned. She paused, looked out at the sea of faces, and went completely off script. But today I want to talk about a different kind of challenge. The kind that doesn't appear on any performance review, but tests you more deeply than any professional obstacle ever could. Her voice wavered slightly, becoming more personal. I want to talk about what happens when you discover that the person you trust most has been living a completely different life than the one you thought you shared. The room went still. Women leaned forward. Todd went rigid in his seat, his face visible panic. "I'm not going to name anyone," Reese continued, though her eyes found Todd in the audience and held his gaze. "But I will tell you that recently I found evidence of betrayal so complete, so carefully hidden, that it made me question my own judgment, made me wonder how I could have been so blind, made me feel foolish and small and disposable." Several women in the audience nodded, recognition in their eyes. They understood this story even without details. One woman in the third row had tears already streaming down her face. The instinct, when you discover something like this, is to collapse privately, to cry alone, to protect the other person's reputation while you absorb all the pain yourself. We're taught that grace means silence, that strength means suffering quietly, that a good woman makes things easier for everyone else, even when they've made things impossibly hard for her. Reese's voice gained power as she continued. "But I realized something. Grace isn't silence. Strength isn't suffering. And making things easier for someone who hurt you just teaches them that hurting you has no consequences." She paused, letting the words land. "So I chose differently. I chose transparency. I chose to let the person who betrayed me experience discomfort instead of protecting them from their own choices. I chose to stop managing their reputation when they clearly hadn't worried about protecting mine." The applause started small, but grew. Women stood. The ovation lasted 3 full minutes while Todd sat frozen, his face the color of old snow. People around him were clapping enthusiastically, and some of them knew him, knew Reese, and were absolutely connecting the dots. When the applause ended and Reese continued, her tone shifted to something more measured, more thoughtful. "I'm not advocating for revenge or cruelty. I'm advocating for something more radical, honesty. For letting people face the natural consequences of their actions, for refusing to sacrifice your dignity to preserve someone else's comfort." She talked about resilience not as endurance, but as active reconstruction, about the difference between staying in a marriage and staying imprisoned, about how sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be treated as optional. She finished with a call to action. "We teach our daughters to be understanding, to compromise, to value peace over justice. Maybe we should teach them to value themselves first, to recognize when understanding becomes enabling, to know the difference between compromise and erasure. Because the world will always ask women to be smaller, quieter, more convenient. And sometimes the most revolutionary thing we can do is simply refuse." The final standing ovation was even longer than the first. Women rushed the stage afterward, some sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival, others just wanting to shake her hand or hug her. Reese felt overwhelmed, moving through the crowd on autopilot, accepting thanks and offers of support, while feeling strangely disconnected from it all. Todd tried to leave quickly, but was stopped repeatedly by acquaintances, making awkward conversation. One woman, who Todd recognized as the wife of his golf partner, looked at him with such knowing disappointment that he felt physically ill. "That was quite a speech," she said coldly, arms crossed. "Very illuminating. I hope you were paying attention, because I certainly was." "I should go," Todd started. "Yes, you probably should. Before any of us say what we're really thinking." She walked away, leaving him standing there, branded by association. In the parking structure, Todd finally intercepted Reese as she was unlocking her car. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "Everyone knows. Everyone in that room knows you were talking about me." "Good." Reese's voice was tired but steady. "Maybe you'll think about that next time you're tempted to lie. This is torture. Public humiliation. You're systematically destroying my reputation." "No, Todd. Torture is finding a condom in your husband's bag. Torture is realizing your best friend has been sleeping with your husband. Torture is lying awake wondering what you did wrong to deserve being treated like you're disposable. What you're experiencing? That's called accountability. And honestly, I'm not even sure I should have done it. The admission surprised them both. Todd stared at her, looking for the anger he expected, but finding only exhaustion. What do you mean? I mean, I just aired our private life in front of hundreds of people. I humiliated you publicly. I used my pain as a weapon. And I'm not sure that makes me better than you, Todd. It just makes me someone who's hurting and doesn't know how to stop. For the first time since the hospital, something like genuine communication passed between them. Todd's defensive anger faded, replaced by something more complex. I never wanted this to happen, he said quietly. Any of it. Then you shouldn't have done it. Reese got into her car. But we're past what you wanted now. We're living in what you created, and we're both just trying to survive it. She drove away, leaving him standing in the concrete shadows, and for the first time, Todd understood that his wife wasn't enjoying this revenge tour. She was drowning in it, trying to find solid ground by tearing down everything familiar. That night, Reese's phone filled with messages, some from women thanking her for her courage, some from friends asking if she was okay, one from Diane Murphy that just said, "I'm proud of you." None from Todd. He'd finally learned that some conversations couldn't be had over text. But lying alone in her bed that night, Reese wondered if she'd crossed a line, if public humiliation was justice or just another form of cruelty, if she was healing or just spreading her pain around until everyone felt as broken as she did. She didn't have answers. She just had the wreckage of everything she'd thought was real, and the terrifying freedom of not knowing what came next. Chapter 7. The Intervention. Kyle Murphy organized the family intervention without telling Todd. He'd called on a Wednesday, using the voice he reserved for serious business. The tone that meant canceling wasn't an option. Fletcher and Diane would be hosting Sunday dinner. Attendance was mandatory, no exceptions. Todd arrived at his parents' house, expecting a tense meal, maybe another awkward conversation about his marriage and when he planned to fix things. Instead, he walked into the living room to find his parents, brother, sister Bryn, and even Aunt Beverly sitting in an arranged semicircle facing one empty chair. His chair. "What is this?" Todd stopped in the doorway, his briefcase still in hand. "Sit down," Fletcher said. Not a request. The voice of a father who'd commanded respect his entire life and wasn't planning to stop now. Todd sat because Fletcher Murphy still commanded that kind of authority, even though Todd was a grown man who'd stopped answering to his father years ago. But this was different. This felt serious in a way that made his stomach clench. Fletcher started, and his disappointment was palpable in every word. "Your mother and I raised you better than this. We taught you about integrity, about keeping promises, about treating people with respect. So I need you to explain to me how you thought it was acceptable to betray your wife, commit expense fraud at the company, and then act like you're the victim when people found out. It's not that simple," Todd started, but the words died under his father's stare. "It is exactly that simple," Kyle cut him off, holding up a folder that Todd recognized with growing dread. "You charge personal expenses to the company account. You listed hotel rooms where you were meeting your mistress as client entertainment. You committed fraud, Todd. The board is furious. I've been covering for you, making excuses, restructuring reports to minimize the damage. And I'm done. I'm tired of protecting you from your own stupidity." The word stupidity stung more than Todd wanted to admit. Kyle had never talked to him like this before, never been so openly contemptuous. Bryn pulled out her phone, her expression harder than Todd had ever seen it. "And let's talk about your social media activity. You've been publicly commenting on Simone's posts for months, compliments, inside jokes, flirty responses to her photos. Anyone who looks can see you were pursuing her openly. This wasn't some spontaneous mistake. You cultivated this. You advertised it, and somehow you thought no one would notice or care. Bryn, that's out of context, Todd tried. Don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't insult our intelligence by pretending we're misreading your own words. I can read, Todd, we all can. And what I read is a man who was so confident he wouldn't get caught that he didn't even bother being subtle. Diane spoke next, and her quiet disappointment was somehow worse than anyone's anger. Her voice was soft, but each word felt like a small blade. I defended you, Todd. When people started gossiping about your marriage, about seeing you at restaurants with someone who wasn't Reese, I told them they were wrong. I said my son would never betray his wife. I believed in your character. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. About you. About the kind of man you'd become. Todd's throat tightened. Mom, I made a mistake. I know I did, but I'm trying to fix it. By doing what? Beverly interjected. She was a divorce attorney, sharp and unsentimental, known for destroying weak arguments in court. By minimizing what you did, by expecting Reese to forgive you quietly so you don't have to experience embarrassment, by trying to control the narrative so you look like less of a villain. None of that is fixing anything, Todd. That's just damage control for your reputation. Reese is making this harder than it needs to be, Todd said, some of his frustration breaking through. She's airing our private business publicly, humiliating me at every opportunity, turning my own family against me. She's holding you accountable, Kyle snapped, standing up now, his patience clearly exhausted. Do you understand the difference? She could have pursued legal action for the expense fraud. I showed her the evidence. She convinced me not to press charges. She could have told everyone at your company. She didn't. She could have gone to the media, made you a public example, destroyed you completely. Everything Reese has done has been surgical and limited. You're still working. You're not in legal trouble. Your reputation is damaged but not destroyed. She's showing remarkable restraint, and you're acting like she's the problem. The silence that followed was crushing. Todd looked around the semicircle at his family, searching for any sympathy, any understanding. He found none. Fletcher leaned forward, his voice heavy with disappointment. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop playing victim. You're going to take full responsibility for what you did without qualifications or excuses. You're going to attend counseling, whether Reese wants to work on the marriage or not, because you clearly need to figure out why you sabotaged your own life. And you're going to accept that this family supports Reese, not you. Not until you prove you understand the gravity of what you've done. You're choosing her over me. Your own son? Todd's voice broke. We're choosing decency over enabling, Diane said firmly, though her eyes were wet. You're still our son. We love you, but you're wrong, and we won't pretend otherwise just to make you comfortable. But then Bryn added something that hit differently. Though, honestly, God, I'm struggling to reconcile the brother I thought I knew with the man who'd do this. I keep asking myself if I ever really knew you at all, or if you were always capable of this and just never showed it before. The intervention lasted another hour. Each family member outlined their disappointment, their conditions for moving forward, their unwillingness to protect him from consequences he'd earned. But Todd noticed something. Despite their unified front, there were cracks. Fletcher's anger seemed to be wavering as the intervention went on, his voice getting quieter. Diane kept crying, clearly torn between supporting Reese and grieving for her son. Even Kyle's righteous fury felt like it was costing him something, like he hated having to be this person to his brother. By the time Todd left, he felt more alone than he'd ever been in his life. But he also felt something else, a small, bitter understanding that even his family's condemnation wasn't absolute. They loved him. That complicated everything. He drove to the house he still technically shared with Reese, finding her in the kitchen, preparing dinner like it was a normal evening. The domesticity felt surreal after the emotional devastation of the past hours. My family had an intervention, he said quietly, leaning against the doorway. I know. Kyle told me. Reese continued, chopping vegetables with methodical precision. They all took your side. Said I was wrong, that I need to face consequences, that I betrayed you in the worst way possible. Todd's voice was hollow. My own family chose you over me. It's not about sides, Todd. It's about right and wrong. You did something wrong. They're acknowledging that reality. But her voice was softer than it had been in days, almost tired. Todd sank into a chair at the kitchen table, finally allowing exhaustion and genuine emotion to show. No more defensiveness, no more trying to manage how he looked. I'm sorry, I mean it. Not because I got caught, but because I genuinely never wanted to hurt you. I know that sounds like every cheater's excuse, but it's true. I don't know why I did this. I had everything, and I risked it for something that meant nothing. Reese set down her knife and turned to face him, really looking at him for the first time in weeks. She saw the man she'd married somewhere underneath the betrayal and lies, and it hurt to see him like this. Broken. Real. Do you know why it meant nothing? She asked quietly. Because Simone wasn't the point. The affair wasn't about her. It was about you feeling entitled to more. More attention, more excitement, more validation. You never stopped to consider what I might need or want. You just took what you wanted and assumed I'd never notice or never care enough to leave. You're right. Of course I'm right. Her tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. But being right doesn't fix anything. And your apology, as sincere as it might be right now, doesn't undo months of lies. It doesn't restore trust. It doesn't make me feel safe with you again. Then what do I do? How do I fix this? Tell me and I'll do it. Reese looked at him for a long moment, seeing the genuine desperation in his face. You can't fix this, Todd. You can only live with what you broke and hope that eventually you understand why you broke it. And even then, understanding doesn't repair. It just means you won't make the same mistake with the next person. There won't be a next person. I only want you. You had me. You threw me away for something easy and exciting. Now you have to live with that choice. She returned to cooking, effectively ending the conversation. Todd sat there watching his wife move through the kitchen, preparing a meal he probably wouldn't be invited to share, and realized that apologies weren't magic. They didn't rewind time or erase damage. They were just words, and words were the cheapest thing he'd ever offered her. That night, as he lay in the guest room, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, Todd finally understood that his family's intervention wasn't the punishment. Living with what he'd destroyed was the punishment, and it was only just beginning. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. Reese had been avoiding this conversation for weeks, but it was time. She texted Simone requesting a private meeting, just the two of them, no audience, no public humiliation. Simone agreed immediately, probably hoping for some kind of resolution that would ease her conscience or at least end the uncertainty. They met at Simone's studio after hours, empty except for the two women and their shared history. Reese arrived first, looking at the creative work displayed on the walls, evidence of the talent she genuinely always admired. Photographs from campaigns Simone had designed, typography that was bold and original, color palettes that showed real vision. That made it worse somehow. That Simone was actually good at what she did, actually deserving of success, actually talented beyond just being beautiful. Simone entered cautiously, closing the door behind her and locking it with a click that sounded too loud in the quiet space. For a moment, they just looked at each other. These two women who'd shared so much before one destroyed it all. "I'm glad you wanted to talk," Simone started, her voice hopeful in a way that made Reese want to scream. "We need to clear the air." "No." Reese's voice was sharp, cutting through the attempted pleasantries. "You don't get to frame this conversation. I talk, you listen. Then you can respond if I decide I want to hear it." Simone nodded, something like relief in her expression. Maybe she wanted to be told what to do, absolved of the responsibility of explaining herself. Maybe she thought being passive would make this easier. "I need to know why," Reese said, and her voice broke slightly on the question. "Not why, Todd. Men cheat for boring, predictable reasons. Ego, opportunity, entitlement. But why you? Why my husband? Out of every man in this city, out of all the single men you could have chosen, why did you choose the one person guaranteed to destroy me?" "It wasn't about you," Simone started, but Reese cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Everything about this was about me." Reese's control fractured, her voice rising. "You knew him because of me. You had access to him because I trusted you in my home, at my table, in my life. You watched me cook dinner for both of you, knowing you were sleeping with my husband. You looked me in the eye and asked about our marriage, about whether we were happy, whether we were trying for kids. You asked me these things while actively destroying any chance we had. So don't tell me this wasn't about me." Simone's eyes filled with tears, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I swear I didn't. It just happened. We connected, and I was lonely." "I don't care that you were lonely." Reese's voice rose to something close to a shout. "Everyone is lonely sometimes. I was lonely too. Lonely in my own marriage, wondering why my husband seemed so distant. But I didn't sleep with your boyfriend or husband or someone you trusted. I didn't betray you because my own life felt empty. Loneliness doesn't give you permission to ruin other people's lives because you're uncomfortable in your own. You don't understand what it was like?" "Then explain it to me," Reese demanded, stepping closer. "Make me understand how our friendship meant so little that 7 months of sneaking around felt justified. Make me understand how you could sit at my table eating food I cooked and accept compliments and talk about old times while planning your next hotel meeting with my husband. Explain it, Simone. I'm listening." Simone was crying openly now, mascara running down her face. "Todd said your marriage was already failing. He said you'd grown apart, that you barely talked anymore, that it was essentially over except for the paperwork. He made it sound like he was already emotionally divorced and just hadn't made it official yet." "And you believed him?" Reese's voice was incredulous. "You've known me for 15 years. You've seen my marriage up close. You knew we were trying for a baby. You knew I loved him. And you believed his story that we were done because it was convenient to believe. Because it made you feel better about what you were doing." "I wanted to believe him," Simone admitted, her voice small. "Because if I believed him, then I wasn't the villain. I was just someone helping him transition out of something that was already broken. I could tell myself I wasn't destroying anything, just being there for someone who needed me." "You were lying to yourself." Reese felt something shift in her chest, from rage toward something colder and more final. "You constructed a narrative where you weren't the bad guy, because actually facing what you were doing would have required you to stop. And you didn't want to stop. That's the truth, isn't it?" It felt good. Being wanted, being chosen, being the exciting one instead of the friend who stayed home and cooked dinner. Simone sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that I loved you, that I still love you. You were my best friend. You are my best friend." No, the word came out flat final. Past tense only. You were my friend. Before you decided to sleep with my husband. Before you prioritized your ego and loneliness over 15 years of friendship. Before you proved that all of it, every late-night conversation, every shared secret, every promise to always support each other, was conditional. Conditional on you getting what you wanted. That's not fair." "Fair?" Reese's voice rose again, emotion flooding back. "You want to talk about fair? You sat next to me at my wedding and cried happy tears when I married Todd. You told me you were so happy I'd found someone who really saw me. You said he was perfect for me. You said you'd always protect our friendship no matter what. Do you remember saying that, Simone? At my wedding reception, drunk on champagne, you grabbed my hands and promised you'd always protect our friendship. And then you fucked my husband, repeatedly, for 7 months. So don't talk to me about what's fair." The rawness of the language shocked them both. Reese never cursed, but the word felt necessary, felt like the only language adequate for what had happened. "I never meant for it to go on so long," Simone said weakly. "It was supposed to be just once, just a mistake we'd regret and never repeat." "But it felt too good to stop," Reese finished. "Yeah, I figured. That's the thing about betrayal, isn't it? It's so much easier the second time. And the third, and by the seventh month it probably felt normal. Maybe you even convinced yourself you deserved this, deserved him, deserved to be happy, even if it was at my expense. Simone was sobbing now, full heaving breaths that shook her whole body. What do you want from me? You want me to say I'm a terrible person? Fine, I am. I'm selfish and weak, and I destroyed the best friendship I ever had for something that meant nothing. Is that what you need to hear? No, Reese said quietly, and the anger had drained out of her voice, leaving only exhaustion and grief. What I needed was for you to be the friend I thought you were, to care about me enough not to do this in the first place. But I don't get what I need, do I? I just get to live with what you chose. I loved you. Simone's voice was barely a whisper. Then you have a very broken definition of love. Reese walked toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the knob. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not even the affair. Affairs happen. People make terrible choices. People get lonely and weak and do things they regret. But you were at my wedding, Simone. You stood next to me and celebrated us. You held my hand when I had that miscarriage last year and told me it would be okay, that I'd have a family someday. You ate at my table and laughed in my home and acted like you gave a damn about my happiness. And all of it was a lie. Or it became a lie. I don't know which is worse. That's what I can't forgive. Not the sex. The friendship that was fake enough that you could do this and still sleep at night. Simone was sobbing now, her face in her hands. It wasn't fake. I did care. I do care. I loved you and I betrayed you and I have to live with that and I don't know how. Not enough. Not even close to enough. Reese opened the door, letting in cool air from the hallway. I hope Todd was worth it. I hope those 7 months of hiding and lying and destroying someone who loved you felt good enough to justify what you've lost. Because you didn't just lose me. You lost the person you thought you were. The person I thought you were. And that's something you'll have to live with long after this affair is forgotten. She walked out, leaving Simone sitting on the floor of her studio, crying into her hands. Reese made it to her car before her own tears started. Not crying for Todd or the marriage, but for the friendship she'd thought was real. For the person she'd believed Simone was. For the loss of something that had apparently never existed the way she'd believed it did. She sat in the parking lot until the crying stopped, until she'd wrung every tear out of her system. Then she dried her face, fixed her makeup and drove away from Simone Ashford's life forever. Some betrayals can be forgiven, some can't, and Reese had finally learned the difference. The friendship was dead, had probably been dead for months. She just hadn't known to bury it until now. Chapter 9. The plan backfires. Reese had spent days planning the gallery presentation, the final public exposure that would terminate Simone's contract and make clear to everyone in their professional circle exactly what had happened. She'd prepared the edited text messages, chosen which ones would be most damaging without being explicitly sexual, timed the reveal perfectly, rehearsed her calm delivery in the mirror of her new place. It would be elegant, devastating, and completely justified. Or at least, that's what she told herself during the sleepless nights leading up to it. The presentation was scheduled for Friday evening. Thursday afternoon, Jennifer Knowles called her into a conference room. Jennifer was a senior partner at Reese's firm, a woman she respected and had learned from over the years. She'd mentored Reese through difficult clients and challenging campaigns, had written the recommendation that helped Reese make partner track. She closed the door with a click that sounded ominous, and Reese's stomach immediately dropped. Reese, we need to talk about the Simone Ashford contract and tomorrow's presentation. What about it? Reese kept her voice neutral, though her palms were suddenly sweating. Jennifer sat down across from her, her expression more sad than angry. I've been reviewing the timeline. You hired her studio 2 weeks after that dinner where both of you seemed uncomfortable. Multiple people noticed the tension. You've structured this massive contract with an unusual public termination clause that frankly raised eyebrows in legal. And now you're planning a presentation where you intend to publicly end the agreement in front of industry peers and potential clients. She paused. I've also seen the presentation outline on the shared drive, Reese. The one you thought was in your private folder, but was actually in the team folder. It's not subtle. Reese felt the blood drain from her face. The outline. She'd been working on it late one night and must have saved it to the wrong location. She'd been so focused on revenge that she'd made a careless mistake, the kind of mistake she'd never made before in her entire career. Jennifer, I can explain. Can you? Jennifer's voice was gentle but firm. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you hired someone specifically to fire them publicly. You're using our firm's reputation and client relationships as cover for personal revenge. And Reese, I understand you're dealing with something personal and painful. I've heard rumors about your separation. But this, she gestured at the folder in front of her, this crosses ethical lines that I can't ignore. The room felt too small suddenly. Reese had trouble breathing. It's not revenge. It's accountability. She slept with my husband. She destroyed my marriage while pretending to be my friend. She doesn't deserve to profit from a contract I gave her while she was stabbing me in the back. Maybe not. Jennifer's voice was soft. But that's not how business works. You know that. If this gets out, if people realize what you're doing, it reflects badly on all of us, on our integrity, on our professional judgment, on our ability to separate personal feelings from business decisions. She leaned forward. I have to consider whether to report this to the ethics board. And Reese, if I do, this could be career-ending for both of us, because I should have caught this sooner, should have questioned the contract terms when they crossed my desk. The threat was real, not vindictive, just honest. Reese could see it in Jennifer's face, in the way she looked genuinely distressed about having this conversation. This wasn't a power play. This was a mentor trying to save her from destroying herself. What are my options? Reese asked quietly. Cancel the presentation. Handle the contract termination privately through standard channels. Write a professional email citing creative differences or timeline issues. Pay the kill fee in the contract. And Reese? Jennifer met her eyes directly. Get some help. Talk to someone. Because this level of anger, this need for public vindication, it's going to destroy you if you don't address it. After Jennifer left, Reese sat in the conference room for 20 minutes just staring at the wall. Everything she'd planned, everything she'd worked toward, was crumbling. She'd been so focused on making Todd and Simone suffer that she'd nearly destroyed her own professional reputation. The realization was sobering and humiliating in equal measure. She went back to her office and closed the door, sat at her desk with her head in her hands. Was Jennifer right? Had her justified anger twisted into something uglier? Had she become the kind of person who'd weaponize professional relationships to cause pain? Her phone buzzed. A text from a colleague she barely knew. Just heard from a friend at Murphy Associates that Todd's been telling people you're having a mental breakdown, and that's why you're acting erratic. Apparently he's saying you need professional help. Thought you should know people are talking. Some believe him. Reese read the message 3 times. Rage, white-hot and clarifying, flooded through her. Even now, even after everything, Todd was trying to control the narrative by making her look unstable. He was painting himself as the concerned husband dealing with an irrational wife, reframing his betrayal as her psychological problem. And apparently it was working. People were buying his version of events. She stood up and started pacing. The fury made it impossible to sit still. Every instinct screamed at her to go through with the presentation tomorrow, to expose not just Simone, but Todd as well, to show everyone exactly who was crazy and who was responding rationally to betrayal. But then she thought about Jennifer's face, about the career she'd built independently of Todd, about the woman she'd been before all this, and the woman she was becoming. Was destroying Todd and Simone worth destroying herself in the process? Reese spent the next hour sitting at her desk, staring at her computer screen, trying to decide who she wanted to be. The old plan involved public humiliation, professional sabotage, using power to cause maximum pain. The ethical path meant walking away from satisfaction, from vindication, from the public acknowledgement that she'd been wronged. Finally, she picked up the phone and called Jennifer back. "I'm cancelling the gallery presentation." "You're right. I was using company resources inappropriately. I'll handle the Simone situation privately and professionally. I apologize for putting you in this position." There was a long pause on the other end. "Thank you for understanding. I know this isn't easy. And Reese, this doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise." After hanging up, Reese sat in the silence of her office. Cancelling the presentation didn't mean she was done. It just meant she was changing tactics. She wasn't going to be reckless anymore, wasn't going to let her pain dictate stupid decisions. She scheduled a private meeting with the key stakeholders to announce Simone's contract termination. No drama, no revelation, just a professional decision about creative direction. She drafted an email that was cold and efficient, citing irreconcilable differences in vision and approach. She calculated the kill fee and authorized payment, even though it hurt to give Simone anything. Then she did something that felt both empowering and terrifying. She called Veronica Marsh, the best divorce attorney in the city, not Aunt Beverly, who would have been gentler. Veronica was known for winning aggressively, for protecting her clients without compromise. The consultation was that same afternoon. Veronica's office was all glass and steel, impressive and intimidating. She reviewed Reese's evidence with clinical efficiency, making notes in precise handwriting. "You have a strong case. Adultery, expense fraud, and now this campaign to damage your reputation by claiming you're mentally unstable. We can file for fault-based divorce. The settlement will be very favorable. How long? Depends on whether he fights. But given the evidence and his current vulnerability, I'd estimate he'll settle. 3 to 6 months. Reese filed the papers that afternoon. She requested they be served at Todd's office the next day during business hours by a professional process server. Not out of cruelty, but because she wanted him to understand that his attempts to paint her as unstable had failed. That she was clear-headed enough to navigate divorce proceedings with precision. When Todd called her after being served, she was ready. "What are you doing?" "You filed." "Without even talking to me about it?" "I'm done talking, Todd. Every conversation we have, you try to manipulate the narrative. You minimize what you did. You try to make this about my reaction instead of your betrayal. And now you're telling people I'm having a breakdown. So yes, I filed. And yes, I'm moving forward without you. Reese, please, we can still work this out." "No, we can't." Her voice was steady, certain. "Because you still don't understand what you did. You think this is about the affair. It's not. It's about the lies. It's about you being willing to destroy my reputation to protect yours. It's about you never once taking full responsibility without adding excuses. I don't want to work it out, Todd. I want it to be over." "Where will you go?" "I already left. I bought a place 3 weeks ago, used money from my separate account that you didn't know I opened the day after I found that condom. I've been planning this, Todd. While you were scrambling to manage appearances, I was planning my exit. I've been 3 steps ahead of you this entire time. You just never noticed." She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From release. From finally choosing her own peace over proving a point. That evening, Reese stood in her new place, surrounded by boxes still unpacked. She'd won something today, though it didn't look like victory. She'd chosen her integrity over revenge. She'd walked away from the satisfaction of public exposure. She'd let Todd and Simone escape the humiliation she'd so carefully planned, but she'd also kept her career, kept her ethics, kept the woman she wanted to be instead of becoming the woman pain had tried to make her. She poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow she'd send the termination email to Simone. Tomorrow she'd start unpacking boxes and building the life that came after betrayal. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to be Rhys Evans again, independent of who Todd Murphy had been or who Simone Ashford had pretended to be. Tonight, she just stood in her empty apartment and felt the weight of choosing herself. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel satisfying. It just felt like survival, like making it through another day of a war she'd never wanted to fight. Her phone buzzed. A text from Grant, the attorney she'd been seeing casually. "Thinking of you. Hope you're okay," she typed back, "getting there slowly." And maybe that was enough. Maybe getting there slowly was the only honest way through. Maybe walking away from revenge wasn't weakness, but the hardest kind of strength. Rhys finished her wine and started unpacking. One box at a time, one choice at a time, building something new from the wreckage of everything that had burned down. Chapter 10. The Reconstruction. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in early autumn. Rhys sat in a conference room while lawyers exchanged papers and Veronica negotiated final details with Todd's attorney. The settlement was fair but firm. She kept the house, most liquid assets, and her dignity. Todd kept his job under Kyle's supervision and whatever was left of his reputation. When Rhys walked out of the attorney's office, legally free, she felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't realized was still clenched tight. The marriage was over. The betrayal was behind her. She could finally breathe without the weight of other people's lies pressing down. The Murphy family had evolved in ways she hadn't expected. Fletcher still barely spoke to Todd beyond necessary pleasantries. His disappointment hardened into permanent distance. Diane maintained contact with both of them, though her relationship with Todd was strained in ways that might never fully heal. She told Rhys privately that she loved her son, but didn't like who he'd become, and that distinction felt important. Kyle kept Todd employed but under stricter oversight, their brotherly relationship now complicated by professional distrust. Bryn called Todd occasionally, reminding him that rebuilding trust took years and he'd only just started. The Community Business Awards ceremony happened on a cool October evening. Rhys attended because her firm was being recognized for innovative client campaigns, and she'd won an individual award for excellence. She wore a blue dress that caught stage lights and made her feel powerful and present in her own skin. Todd was there because his company sponsored the event. He sat near the back with Kyle, watching Rhys accept her award. She gave a speech about resilience and reinvention, about choosing yourself when others treat you as optional. The audience applauded warmly, and Todd found himself clapping too, struck by how confident she looked, how whole. After the ceremony, they encountered each other in the lobby where people mingled over wine and careful networking. The meeting was inevitable in a city this size, in overlapping professional circles. "Congratulations," Todd said quietly. "You deserved that recognition." "Thank you." Rhys's tone was cordial but not warm. They were strangers now who happened to know each other's history. "I'm in therapy," he offered. "Real therapy, twice a week. Trying to understand why I sabotaged everything. Why I thought I needed more when I had everything that mattered. That's healthy. I'm glad you're doing that work. Does it matter that I'm trying to be better?" "It matters for you, Todd, for whoever you become in your next relationship. But it doesn't change what happened between us." She adjusted her purse, preparing to leave. "I've started seeing someone. His name is Grant. He's a civil rights attorney, and he treats me like I'm someone valuable, not someone convenient." Todd's face showed pain, but also acceptance. "You deserve that. You always did. I just couldn't see it when it mattered." "No, you couldn't." She glanced across the lobby where a handsome man in a grey suit was waiting, holding 2 glasses of wine. "That's him. I should go." "Rhys?" Todd's voice stopped her. "I really am sorry, not for getting caught, for hurting you, for being too weak to either fix our marriage honestly or end it honorably." She looked at him, this man who'd once been her husband. "I accept your apology, but sorry doesn't rebuild what's destroyed. It just acknowledges the wreckage." She walked away toward Grant, who handed her wine and asked how she was feeling. They left together, stepping into night air that smelled like possibility. Todd watched them go, then walked to his car alone. The solitude was something he'd earned. Kyle had mentioned maybe giving him more responsibility again eventually, but trust was rebuilt slowly. His parents' disappointment had become permanent background noise. Bryn texted occasionally, but their relationship was different now, conditional. Weeks later, Reese stood in her bedroom, completely redecorated. Nothing remained of the space she'd shared with Todd. The walls were soft cream, the furniture sleek and chosen for her taste alone. Photographs showed her with friends, with Grant, at events where she was genuinely happy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grant. "Still on for dinner?" Thinking Italian, she smiled, typed a response, then looked at herself in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the one who'd found a condom and felt her world collapse. She was someone new, built from ruins, but not defined by them. Some women crumble when betrayed. Others become architects, carefully demolishing false foundations and building something authentic. Reese had been both. The crumbling had been necessary, but the rebuilding was where her power lived. She grabbed her jacket and keys, ready for dinner with a man who saw her clearly. The past was finished. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in years, Reese Evans felt completely free.